Hi, my name is Bob Greenyer and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So today I am going to talk about O-Day Birdies 2, Science over Superstition. It's 24th of July 2025. So if you were able to or can go and see my previous presentation, O-Day Birdies, we looked at 3 images that were sent to me by one Ryan S. Wood. He did say that one of these images was in Project Blue Book in some form, but otherwise that in the form that they were sent to me, they had never been published before in public. And one of them you can see here is from 9th of April 1950, another one 17th of March 1953, and the third one was from June 1958. These are the structures in question that we discussed in O-Day Birdies, and we discussed how they were produced technologically in recent years in a range of different experiments by one Alexander Shishkin in a whole range of different experiments. One by Perevoschikov and colleagues here, using film and magnets and water and a little laser. And that is the link for that. And then I went into some detail about how this has been technologically produced in water flow plasma discharge, PDFL experiments, and also in experiments that used a synchrotron and a conversion target. And apparently these structures had accumulated on the poles of a magnet according to their thinking, and they were knocked off by the gamma rays that were produced. So what we are going to look at in O-Day Birdies 2 is another series of images that was sent to me this morning by one Gabrielle Ross. And thank you very much to Gabrielle for sharing this with me. And these apparently were in the second edition, down here, of Tom Bearden's Excalibur Briefing. Now, given the age of most of these photos, it's likely that they were in the first version, which was from 1980. Of course, that is right in the middle of the Cold War. And it's only a short period, that is to say 6 years after Tom Bearden finished his role as a military intelligence officer. Tom Bearden, you may not know, he worked on re-entry heat shielding for space vehicles during his military service. But if you've listened to or read any of his materials since he left military service, you would be not surprised if he told you that he was involved with other advanced military technologies during the Cold War era. Anyway, Gabrielle was excited to tell me, oh, it has been published before. Well, the only one that I can see that is actually part of one of the images that we published in Birdies 1 is this one down the bottom left. And there's quite a lot missing from it, both in terms of quality and in content, which is absolutely critical to investigate and evaluate what you are seeing in this image. But before we get into his comments, that is to say Tom Bearden's comments in Excalibur Briefing on these 4 photos, which he refers to as containing anchor patterns, which are unidentified flying objects, according to him, he starts to talk about one of the interesting aspects of combined orthorotation into our normal 3-dimensional space. Now, this orthorotation phrase you may remember me highlighting as something that Andrei Puharich, who brought over Uri Geller to work on the Stargate Psychic Spy program with Hal Puthoff, he referred to this as a process that allowed things to disappear from our physical reality. They were ortho-rotated into some other plane of existence and was shifted, and or they could come back or come into our plane of existence. So you can see that there was definitely this term being bandied about around these times between these broadly connected, it would seem, intelligence officers. As we know, Hal Puthoff is a U.S. Naval intelligence officer. Okay, so orthorotation, that's the first point that I want to point out there. And then I will point out here that he says photo 1, this one here, is taken by Ira Maxey. Now, we remember this name, but the photo is unfamiliar. And he goes on to say, and it shows several tulpoidal forms which are intersecting our frame in a white or photon-emitting anchor-like pattern. Well, okay, I remember there was only one in the shot that I saw, and we shared last time, and there appears to be one here and one here. And that's very, very interesting. But what is this word, which I haven't heard before, tulpoidal? Well, I had to dig into one of his other books here, which was A Mind-Brain Matter Model Consistent with Quantum Physics and UFO Phenomena. 1979 MUFON conference. So this is the UFO sort of fraternity out there, their conference in 1979. So this would just be a few years after. So rather, I said 1980. This book was 6 years after. This would be 5 years after he concluded his service as an intelligence officer working in high technology in the military. And he's giving this talk at the MUFON conference. And of course, 1979 was the year in which my father showed these 4 orbs in the sky moving around, myself and my siblings. It's also the year in which A.C. Holt published the intergalactic transport drive proposal for NASA and went on to work with NASA on propulsion systems. So 1979 is, and it was based, that propulsion system proposed by A.C. Holt, on what they understood from observation of UFOs. And so very, very interesting time. Now, looking at this, and I'm going to read this because it's quite bizarre, honestly, given the fact that we can technologically produce these structures on which he is referring or giving them this name, tulpoidal. So just as it says, dreams and collective unconscious, just as personal dream can be psychoanalyzed to reveal the unresolved stresses and conflicts in the personal unconscious, the materialized dreams of the collective unconscious, i.e. the tulpa manifestations, can be psychoanalyzed to reveal the unresolved stresses and conflicts in the collective unconscious. This is 17, and that reference is actually his book. Thomas E. Bearden, Species Metapsychology, UFOs and Cattle Mutilations. That's a good discussion. Again, this is 1978. And so he's really getting out there and talking about these various things and putting them into some sort of metaphysical context. However, in analyzing the tulpoidal materializations and manifestations, one must seek out stress situations that exist between 2 or more large groups of people. In fact, between great nations. Since World War II, the major stress on the collective unconsciousness has been the Cold War. This UFO, that's unidentified flying object tulpoidal phenomena, psychologically should reveal significant aspects of the Cold War and will incorporate conventional psychological analysis and knowledge of the Soviet development of new superweapons, virtual state engineering psychotronic weaponry, to show a fit to the major UFO phenomena. So he's basically saying we are under attack, and because of this attack we are seeing these things that are they there or not? First, we summarize briefly the mechanism for tulpoidal materialization. Figure 12 and 13, this one and this one, show how unresolved stresses in large groupings of people filter deep into the layers of collective unconscious, increasing the psychokinetic ability attached to the unrelieved stresses, and ultimately resulting in psychokinetic pop-out or even full materialization. Oh, wow. I don't know about you, but this seems like a huge psychological operation given to the people who are studying UFOs in the open space by a intelligence analyst from the military, and saying that you don't understand this, but really, and down here in your deep psychonscious, there's this conflict going on, which you can't really perceive as being something that's happening to you, but it is going on, and because of this, in your dream and wake state, you are manifesting these things either as individuals or collectiveness. Which are they there? I don't know. And this diagram over here, and of course, again, this reference here is in another book by Tom Bearden. The background for Soviet development of psychotronic weapons is given in Soviet Psychotronic Weapons and a Condensed Background. And it's saying that all of these different things over here in the Soviets area, they were projecting hate in stress into the ether, into the some sort of subspace. And this was being manifested in USA and Europe as the observation of cattle mutilations and UFOs and spacecraft. And down here, it's going through a YouTube, like a quasi-hydraulic YouTube. So this is the YouTube before YouTube. This is this psychotronic YouTube before YouTube existed, where you were getting like projections of these things manifested in either the individual or collective consciousness. And is it real? I don't know, but like, okay. Yeah, okay. This kind of falls apart if you can technologically prove that the things that are being said to be manifestations of stresses caused by the Soviets as a collective consciousness or unconscious manifestation is just a technological thing of something that naturally occurs in nature, and that also can be technologically produced. And so let's break down some of these images. So this image here, he ascribes to Ira Maxey. We already know that this was ascribed to Ira Maxey. This looks like an original photo that has been high quality scanned, and that's what I was given, and thank the gods that it was, because we can clearly see that this is not the same photo as this. So obviously Ira took a bunch of photos, and when she developed those, she saw a bunch of these structures on there. Now, this photo is cropped, or it's taken from an angle where we cannot see the power lines. So those things are taken out of the equation, out of the equation in terms of determining what's going on. So yes, it is a different photo, but yes, it is the same source. Both people are saying it's the same source, and the record on this document is that it is from Ira Maxey. But in this case, we have clearly two structures, and I guess if we cropped off this at a suitable level, maybe we couldn't see it there, but we see no power lines, and the leaves, whilst they're both deciduous and they look like the same kind of tree, we don't see any of these roof lines or these power lines, so it's probably from a different angle. And I think probably what she was doing was taking a photograph of this wonderful, stormy, intense cloud-like structures with these little tendrils reaching down. And just for a point of reference, this band down here is actually just a printing error from the book, or the scanning book printing or scanning of the book process. This is not in the photo because it spans across several of the photos shared. So Tom assumes it is photon emissions, and so let's read what he says again. Photo 1 was taken by Ira Maxey, and it shows several tuboidal forms. Does it now, Tom? Which are intersecting our frame in a white or photon-emitting anchor-like pattern. The curved part of the anchor pattern is due to the spinning orthogonal rotation. Okay, well, that actually might be, something spinning around here, and that's giving the curved part. That is kind of like, no, that is how the structures break down when they hit cellulose acetate film, and they move the charged particles around as they are emerging from the cluster, from the neutral state into the white state, and they are leaving these marks. And Alexander Shishkin and his colleagues at Dubna, the nuclear facilities there, have established that the scale of these things indicates that because of the distance they're traveling, they are up to 10 kilo electron volts, as determined by Ken Shoulders. Okay, but according to him, it's due to the spinning or orthogonal rotation, and the shaft portion intersects at right angles. Well, it certainly does do that. So he's almost right in terms of the kind of shape that is suggested by this as a cross-section. Note also the clouds, whose water content is highly conducive to kindling of the tolpoid into the first bioframe in this case. This is just frankly, sorry Tom, it's just nonsense. But anyway, it might have been good to say to an audience in the late 1970s or 1980. It might have sounded interesting, I don't know. But from what we know now, this was just an idea, and it doesn't stand to scientific scrutiny nowadays. And this is a bit of a weird situation for me, because Tom Bearden I've held up as a hero in research, but now I'm kind of wondering whether, and we'll see more of this as we go on, whether this is actually him being an intelligence asset to try and convince people that these are things you couldn't possibly comprehend, and they're just a manifestation of your brain thinking in the wrong way, or being under stress from Soviet psychological aggression, or psychological weapons being applied to your brain. No, Tom, this is a thing produced by nature and by technological processes that exposes the film. Okay. And so essentially, these can be technologically produced by Bogdanovich and Shishkin and others. And in those cases, for the most part, they are actually produced with water in play. So Shishkin used a cavitator. Tom Bearden is suggesting that water is at play. Obviously, in the Shishkin cavitator, there was water and oil in there. In Bogdanovich, it was water flow plasma discharge. In the work of Perevoschikov, it was a container of water. And so, and in the things that we didn't see but were probably present there in Leonid Oritskyev's exploding titanium foil, that was actually in water. So water may be absolutely critical to the formation of these, but not in the sense of it allowing for the highly conducive kindling of the tolpoid into the first bioframe, whatever that means. And so moving on to the next image in the selection here, this is the one that actually is part of the high quality image that we had previously shared in Birdies 1. Firstly, you can see that it's flipped horizontally. We know that it's flipped horizontally, and this is the original orientation because the text down here is correct. It's not mirrored. If this was flipped like this is, then this would be the wrong way round. Okay, so firstly, we know that that is flipped. Secondly, it's slightly squashed horizontally. This might just be the typesetting in the book. It might have been scanning process or whatever. But the actual birdie itself is slightly squashed. It is definitely a partial photo, and this is incredibly important. Now, when I say why that's important, you can forgive Tom for maybe making a mistake, or maybe it was deliberate that it was cropped at this level. But the important thing for me, above all else, is that and when we zoomed into this picture with the high quality image that I used in Birdies 1, we could see the welders are joining this pipe to this pipe, and we know that welding is a process that can lead to these production of these structures because you've got exotic vacuum objects, you've got a spark being formed in the welding process, so that's not surprising that you would get those here. And of course, this is in this part in Venezuela, which is in leading into the Orinoco Delta. It's very, very humid there, and so there will be lots of water in the environment. And so you cannot see the welders here. It's just not able to pick out welders in this image. So it gives them the choice to say what they like. And of course, this one is in Project Blue Book. It says another anchor-like tolpoid. All right. This time, the orthorotation is reversed, giving photon absorption, moving through the sky over a dock area by the water. This is not moving over the sky. This is an exposure on the film, in my humble opinion, Tom. It is not a UFO that is in the sky. And the fact that this is black, I said that this, in my view, was because this was a positive film. And in order to, because he's essentially saying something pseudo-scientific, literally it's pseudo-scientific, it's horrible to use that phrase in reference to Tom Bearden, but that is, in my opinion, what is being said here. They're saying that it is doing photo absorption, and that accounts for the black. No, I think it's because it is reversed something, but in this case it's reversed reversal photo film. So down here is our biggest clue, and that is this word Kodak safety. Now, by 1953, when this photo was taken, all of Kodak stocks were safety films. The Kodak safety markings with additional text was standard on 35mm, 126, 127 and other formats. 436 down here is not a standard code. I went and did a lot of research on this. This basically is not a standard code, and it was suggested that this could be because it was a custom batch for scientific or military purposes. Well, if you are, managing the installation of oil and you wanted to do high quality imagery of this very, very important strategic installation down there in Venezuela, you might want to get very, very high quality images that you might want to present. And so, firstly, I mean, that's one thing. The high clarity of this was something that made me believe that actually we're probably looking at a positive, as I call it, like a slide that might be presented. And essentially, the safety word here is it's because cellulose acetate was the non-flammable version that replaced the highly flammable cellulose nitrate films that were used in earlier decades. And so from the 1930s onwards, basically Kodak had completely transitioned to safety films. But they actually never normally did this Kodak dash safety. It was Kodak dash safe, so it's Kodak safety film, and normally the type of film was after. So this is not a normal batch. This was maybe custom made for a particular purpose or for this scientific or military purpose. And so that is interesting in its own right. But essentially, always this is white on black in the film, whether you're negative or a positive. And why is that important? Well, since the edge text is white on black, which it is here, and the photo is not inverted, then I suggest that this is a photo of a section of a reversal film rather than a print. That is to say, if I was to take this as a negative and I was to expose a film and I was to include the edge of it, then this would appear as black and this would appear as white if that was actually a film. But in fact, what we're seeing here is this is white on black, and the crane, which you can imagine is darker than the bright sky, is actually dark, which is what it should be if it was a positive or what's called a reversal film. So I thank the person that put this together as a military document for including this part of whatever they took a photo of. And so I've deduced that this might be specifically Kodak Direct Positive Panchromatic Film or similar as a speciality stock, and that would match for the time. And effectively, these could be processed to create positive transparencies such as those used for applications like technical slides, aerial photography, or industrial documentation where projection or direct viewing was needed. So I think that this was used for direct projection or viewing, and that all the evidence now suggests that this is not some spooky action at a distance or some coming into the plane at some ortho rotation that's the opposite way round. No, this is just the same birdies on a reversal film or a positive film, and that settles that in my view. And so, no, it is not a time orientation reversal producing photon absorption, Tom. Sorry. It is just a birdle on what is actually called reversal film stock, which I call positive in my mind. And This does have implications, however, because if you typically what you're doing when you're doing these experiments and you want to see these strange radiation, these tracks, these monopoles blowing up on the acetate, cellulose acetate, is that you have the film in its spool, in its container, or radiographic emulsions inside their sheaths. You are not exposing this film to anything other than emissions that are coming from the device that's under test. So unexposed film would be what the default case is. This obviously got exposed, okay? However, if you had unexposed positive film, you would see these as black on black. And so from a practical point of view, in experiments, you actually want to use negatives all of the time. But it is interesting to note that you can also expose positives. Okay, and then this is so this is the only image that's partially the same, but it's, in my view, either accidentally or very, very, very deliberately obfuscating key information from the frame. That the welders were there, and that it was the right orientation, and that this data down here shows that it's a positive, which completely throws out the argument given by Tom Bearden that it was an orthorotation which was reversed, giving photon absorption. Okay, all right. So it's not a tulpoid in my view, and it's not anything to do with orthorotation. Okay, so then the next slide here is one that we haven't seen before, and this third photo was taken in Wales. It's one of several, although we only see one example, which clearly captured another anchor-like tulpoid in a photo-emitting mode. No, this is not a photo-emitting mode. No, it is not a tulpoid, but it is one of these structures. So thank you for putting that into the open space. Now, the last image that he has in Excalibur Briefing is phenomenal evidence for our field, and that is this. The fourth photo, taken by Fay Clark in a darkened room, shows very similar photonic patterns being emitted by Ingo Swann's hands after Swann was asked to try to produce energy to be photographed. In the rightmost arc, the shaft-like perpendicular bisector can be seen associated with Ingo's arms. Bioenergy and mind energy are the same, whether being emitted from a single human system mind or from a collective system mind. Now, I do agree that this can be controlled by the brain. It has a connection with the brain, and I'll say a little bit more before we close out. I've contrast adjusted this, but just a little bit for those that don't know anything about Ingo Swann. He was born in 1933. Unfortunately, he died in 2013. American psychic and artist. He pioneered remote viewing, a method to perceive distant targets using extrasensory perception. He worked on the CIA's Stargate program, the project, accurately described Jupiter's atmosphere, and influenced a magnetometer. This is very, very important because we're talking about topological monopoles, and these things don't have when they're in the neutral state, they have a non-radiating boundary where only scalar and vector potentials come out, but in their core they have an intense magnetic core. A 2002 study noted atypical brain activity during his remote viewing. Well, there we go. His cosmic art. Now, Hal Puthoff said of Ingo Swann that he was one of the best, if not the best, remote viewer they had, and that he was a brilliant artist. And what they found actually was when he was doing his art, the same areas of the brain were activated as when he was doing remote viewing. And I have argued before that was made public that I believe that creativity is the same type of thing. The inspiration that you get from creativity is the same kind of thing as remote viewing. His comic art and books, plus the Ingo Swann Research Fellowship, cement his parapsychology legacy. Okay, so in conclusion, exotic vacuum objects, EVOs, magnetotoroelectrical radiation, energy solitons, etc., whatever you like to call them, are able to expose negative and reversal positive film. Use of unexposed film means that practically only negative film is useful in detections for your experiments. Water or oxygen dissolved in water, or a source of hydrogen may be critical to easy formation of these structures that may be key to coherent energy transformation tech. Okay, so as I've argued in the past, these magnetic clusters can bind to the paramagnetic oxygen in water, or they can be released from critical impacts on elements, and in the case of hydrogen, it's 5 electron volts, in which releases the hidden clusters of this type from within the atom itself. If you're going to use anything from lithium onwards, you need to use 2,000 to 4,000 times the critical impact energy of 5 electron volts to release it. So either those already aggregated and bound to oxygen dissolved in water, or water itself as a source of both hydrogen and oxygen, and this ease of which you can generate these things as determined by the Moscow researchers that work actually at Dubna, Shishkin, Dubovik and Karols and their colleagues. It's important that hydrogen is in play, and of course anywhere that water is, you have hydrogen in play. They can interact magnetically, such as observed by Zatelepin and Baranov, and I showed how they can cause these things, this flux to come out, which is detectable in a spinner type device that they set up. But of course Ingo Swann, if we go back to the previous slide here, was able to influence a magnetometer. Very, very important. I think what was captured on the film as supposedly being released from him when he's trying to produce energy out of his body is the same thing that would be influencing a magnetometer. And in that vein, EVOs lead to EVOs lead, that is, they are ahead of every disruptive discharge, according to Ken Shoulders. So if you have a spark coming out of your finger, then the spark will be led by an exotic vacuum object. But sometimes you might be able to release an exotic vacuum object that isn't at the level of having a discharge behind it. Okay, so like Kirlian photography, those kind of things. So here, at the end here, I'm saying that I have argued, and I've argued this previously, that these structures that come out of the body are entangled with the emitter's consciousness, that is to say, Ingo Swann's consciousness or Uri Geller's consciousness, and can influence even metals, including at grain boundaries. This explains spoon bending, the Hutchison effect, water memory, and the abilities of Ninel Kalagina and Ingo Swann. I think we are very close to a full explanation for both coherent energy transformation technology, for the spoon bending, for psychokinetic abilities, for the Hutchison effect, all of these kind of phenomena. And these are the same things that actually do allow for propulsion that would appear as anti-gravity. And it's a bit ironic that these kind of structures that are shown here in O'Day Birdies 1 and these kind of structures that we have just discussed now here in O'Day Birdies 2 are related to real UFO tech, but these are not UFO tech. And so thank you very much for your time. This was O'Day's Birdie 2. I'll see you in the next video.
On August 15th, 1977, a strange signal from the constellation Sagittarius was received by the Big Ear radio telescope. The signal, known as the WA signal, reached an intensity up to 30 times higher than the usual signals and had a duration of 72 seconds. Its name comes from the note written at that moment by the person who discovered it, Jerry R. Eman, collaborator and SETI project, a project for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence founded by NASA in 1960. The WA signal is, among all the strange signals received up to now, the one that has the greatest likelihood of having been emitted by intelligent extraterrestrial beings. Despite its origin still being uncertain,